Blog Talk Radio.
Hello, everyone. Good evening. This is Lori Smith on Blog Talk Radio. This is Child Abuse Prevention, and Human Rights Abuse Prevention is up to us. And we're on for 30 minutes. It's a live internet streaming radio broadcast from blogtalkradio.com, and the chat room is open. Glad to be here. It's 10 o'clock p.m. here in Calgary, Alberta, Wednesday night, April the 6th. I'm just happy to be able to do these shows. Thanks, everybody, for tuning in. I appreciate it. I just got done with the Dreamcatcher show, and so I'm just trying to catch my breath. And I just, I didn't have any idea how long I'd be doing these shows. I started in November 2009 and wasn't really quite sure who would be listening or if anybody would be listening. And I just checked my numbers and for all the shows that have been listened to, and there's almost 23,800 shows listened to. So people are listening to the show. I really appreciate everybody who's taking the time to tune in, because I know it's a lot of work for me, to do the shows. I know how much time it takes for me to do them, so I know, it's hard to follow people's shows like that on a regular basis. So I really appreciate people who are taking the time to listen to my shows. Like, that's just really awesome. So thank you very much for being here and being a part of this. And I appreciate your support. Wouldn't mean much if nobody was listening. So I do appreciate it, and that's what kind of keeps me going. So yeah, I'm glad to be able to be here, and I want to continue looking at this PDF that I was talking about on Monday night, and we'll just continue on with that for a while. It's a lengthy PDF, so I don't think we'll cover the whole thing, but it is worth taking a look at, and so I'll be sure and give you that information. And it's I'm not a counselor or a therapist. I'm just a private citizen paying to do my own shows, and I'm a survivor of child abuse, and so I wanted to speak out and really go worldwide and speak out, and hopefully that'll be the case. I'd like to go first of all national within Canada and even local, and then go international if I can, and just to be part of the change, because it's going to take all of our voices, right? That's what I realized. I had seen so many people out here making a lot of noise about child abuse and preventing and stopping child abuse. And I thought, man, I can use my voice. I can find an avenue at Blog Talk Radio. What an awesome way to be able to do this. And there are a lot of people out here. I like to listen to all kinds of shows. Unfortunately, I haven't had the time. I've been so busy. But I used to actually listen to quite a few shows during the week and on the weekends. And, if my schedule changes here in the future, I'll be able to catch a few more shows of people who follow my shows, because I do enjoy listening to people's shows. And I've just been so busy that I hardly have time to do anything. So, there is some great stuff on here on Blog Talk Radio. And so it's a great way to raise your voice. It will do it, saying whatever it is you got to say, right? So thanks everybody for being here. I appreciate it. This PDF, I'll give you the title for this PDF again, and I found this on the Child Welfare Information Gateway. They have some great information there. This is called Preventing Child Maltreatment. It's a guide to taking action and generating evidence. It's put out by World Health Organization, the WHO, as well as ISPCAN, and that's the International Society for Prevention of Child Abuse and Neglect. And they put this PDF out in 2006. So it's really not all old, considering that a lot of the information that we're getting, in 2011 is really from 2009, because it takes at least a year or more to compile those reports. So, we're always a couple years behind, generally, for most reports that are coming out, right? So this is actually not all old, and I think there's some good information on here. And so we were sort of taking a look at why this is so important to get involved to promote public education and awareness regarding child abuse. And then they started the first part of the first chapter actually is about child abuse and maltreatment, right? So that's kind of where we sort of got to on Monday, and chapter 1, which was the nature and consequences of child maltreatment. And so we sort of read through those. Child maltreatment refers to the physical and emotional mistreatment, sexual abuse, neglect, and negligent treatment of children, as well as to their commercial or other exploitation. It occurs in many different settings. The perpetrators of child maltreatment may be any number of people, parents or other family members, caregivers, friends, acquaintances, strangers, others in authority such as teachers, soldiers, police officers, clergy, employers, health care workers, other children. These are perpetrators of child maltreatment. Anyone can be an abuser. Even children can be abusers. Anyone can be an abuser if they choose to abuse, right? So, grandparents, aunts and uncles, cousins, neighbors, teachers, coaches, just anybody, right? That's the thing. It's absolutely horrific that people choose to abuse, and choose to hurt another child or to hurt anyone really, but we're talking about child abuse here mainly. And sometimes I do shows on domestic violence and other types of topics, but lately I have really been geared to child abuse prevention and child abuse issues, and that's because it's so important that we talk about this stuff, you know what I mean? But domestic violence and abuse, I'm very much an advocate speaking out against that as well. All human rights, really, it's very important that we do. And so this one section here, we had sort of read down through here, there's a section called Child Maltreatment and Damage to the Developing Brain. They said in recent years, there's been an upsurge of research into early brain development, including into the effects of maltreatment on the developing brain during infancy and early childhood. And this research is starting to give clear indications that the brain's development can be physiologically altered by prolonged, severe, or unpredictable stress, including maltreatment, during a child's early years. Such an alteration in the brain's development can, in turn, negatively affect the child's physical, cognitive, emotional, and social growth. And they said different parts of the brain develop by receiving stimulation that provokes activity in that region. And over time, the brain grows larger and denser, reaching nearly 90% of its adult size by the time a child is 3 years old. And they said if stimulation and nurture are lacking, for example, if the parents or caregivers are hostile to or uninterested in the child, the development of the child's brain may be impaired. And since the brain adapts to its environment, it will adapt to a negative environment just as readily as it will to a positive one. And chronic stress sensitizes neutral pathways and overdevelops those regions of the brain involved in responses to anxiety and fear. It also often results in the underdevelopment of other neural pathways in other regions of the brain. And the brains of children who experience the stress in the form of physical or sexual abuse or chronic neglect will focus their resources on survival and responding to threats in the environment. And this chronic stimulation of the brain's response to fear means that particular regions of the brain will frequently be activated. And these regions will therefore be likely to be overdeveloped at the expense of other regions that cannot be activated at the same time, such as those involved in complex thought. The end result may be that regions of the brain not connected to the fear response are not available to the child for learning. It's a huge issue, and they're just really starting to get it, starting to develop enough research, to come up with, what happens to a child's brain through the process of if a child's growing up in a lot of violence with a lot of abuse and in a dysfunctional, unnurturing environment. They're just really starting to get the real info on that, right? So I find this very interesting. The effects of experiences during infancy and early childhood on brain development create the basis for the expression of intelligence, emotions, and personality. When these early experiences are primarily negative, children may develop emotional, behavioral, and learning problems that persist throughout their lifetime, especially if targeted interventions are lacking. For instance, children who have experienced chronic abuse and neglect during their first few years may live in a persistent state of hyperarousal or disassociation, anticipating a threat from every direction. Their ability to benefit from social, emotional, and cognitive experiences may be impaired, and to learn and incorporate new information, whether from the classroom or new social experience, the child's brain must be in a state of attentive calm, one that the traumatized child rarely achieves. So children who have not been able to develop healthy attachments with their caregivers and whose early emotional experiences through their impact on the brain have not laid the necessary groundwork for positive emotional development may have a limited capacity for empathy. And the ability to feel remorse and empathy are built on experience. In the extreme case, if a child feels no emotional attachment to any human being, that child cannot be expected to feel remorse for hurting or even killing someone. Where maltreatment has already occurred, there is some evidence that intensive early intervention can help minimize the long-term effects of this trauma on the development of the brain. However, while early intervention with maltreated children can minimize the effects of abuse and neglect, it is considerably more beneficial to prevent maltreatment before it occurs. The costs, both in human and economic terms, of trying to heal these children are much greater than the costs of preventing maltreatment and thereby promoting healthy development of the brain during the first few years of life. And that was adapted from In Focus, Understanding the Effects of Maltreatment on Early Brain Development, National Clearinghouse on Child Abuse and Neglect, Information, Washington, D.C., 2001, and assessed May 5th, 2006. So, yeah, this is really something, I look back at my own experiences. Everybody, who tunes into my morning show, One Child Abuse Survivor to Another, really gets a little bit of an eye-opener on what I went through and what I remember from, and realize and recognize what happened to me when I was growing up in this, violent and abusive environment from day one, from the born into it and then grew up in it. And I'm sure that it did affect me. I'm absolutely positive. I have always, it's like what they were talking about here as far as a child living in a sort of a state of hyperarousal or disassociation and persistent, anticipating a threat from every direction. I mean, it's just part of my makeup. It's hard for me to trust anything. You know what I mean? So someone might be trying to really be honest and decent to me, and I still wonder what their motives are. It's kind of like, I don't perceive people as my friend. I have a defense mechanism really built in place that the world, because I grew up that way. It's just part of my behavior. It's part of my makeup. I have learned as an adult to open up and to give people the benefit of the doubt. You know what I mean? But I just, it's just it's from living like that, for so long, right? You just develop these ways of behaving and ways of looking at the world and seeing the world. And so I can relate to this stuff, and I'm sure that there's lots of people out there that can. And it's horrific. It's absolutely horrific. Like no child should ever have to go through that. I mean, there's so many children, right now who are going through this, and there's so many survivors who have survived this, right? Conceptual definitions of child maltreatment. Child maltreatment is defined as all forms of physical and or emotional ill treatment, sexual abuse, neglect, negligent treatment, or commercial or other exploitation resulting in actual or potential harm to the child's health, survival, development, or dignity in the context of a relationship of responsibility, trust, or power. Right? So people hurting children just in any way, and whether it's physical abuse, sexual abuse, emotional, psychological abuse, neglect. Right? Physical abuse of a child is defined as the intentional use of physical force against a child that results in or has a high likelihood of resulting in harm for the child's health, survival, development, or dignity. And this includes hitting, beating, kicking, shaking, biting, strangling, scalding, burning, poisoning, and suffocating. Much physical violence against children in the home is inflicted with the object of punishing. Sexual abuse, so it's just to punish the child, right? Sexual abuse is defined as the involvement of a child in sexual activity that he or she does not fully comprehend, is unable to give informed consent to, or for which the child is not developmentally prepared, or else that violates the laws of social taboos of society. Children can be sexually abused by both adults and other children who are, by virtue of their age or stage of development, in a position of responsibility, trust, or power over the victim. Emotional and psychological abuse, they list here. Emotional and psychological abuse involves both isolated incidents as well as a pattern of failure over time on the part of a parent or caregiver to provide a developmentally appropriate and supportive environment. Acts in this category may have a high probability of damaging the child's physical or mental health, or the child's physical, mental, spiritual, moral, or social development. Abuse of this type includes the restriction of movement, patterns of belittling, blaming, threatening, frightening, discriminating against, or ridiculing, and other non-physical forms of rejection or hostile treatment. And neglect includes both isolated incidents as well as a pattern of failure over time on the part of a parent or other family member to provide for the development and well-being of the child, where the parent is in a position to do so in one or more of the following areas: health, education, emotional development, nutrition, shelter, and safe living conditions. The parents of neglected children are not necessarily poor. They may equally be financially well off. And they said the scale of the problem, according to WHO, the World Health Organization, in the year 2002, an estimated 31,000 deaths were attributed to homicide among children less than 15 years of age. It is possible for child deaths due to maltreatment to be missed even in those high-income countries that track such deaths. And for this reason, these estimates underestimate the true number of deaths from child maltreatment. Global estimates of child homicide suggest that infants and very young children are at greater risk, with rates for the 0 to 4 year age group more than double those for 5 to 14-year-olds. It's just absolutely horrific how many little babies and children are killed every year, at the hands of someone who's supposed to be protecting that child, the hands of the parents, the caregivers, someone who's supposed to be in charge of and responsible for that child, and the child ends up being killed, whether intentionally murdered or just because of the abuse, dying because of the abuse. It's absolutely horrific. They said infants and preschool children are at the greatest risk of fatal maltreatment as a result of their dependency, vulnerability, and relative social invisibility. and their cases are least likely to come to the attention of those who are in a position to monitor their care and safety and who are not family members or caregivers. The risk of fatal abuse is 2 to 3 times higher in low-income and middle-income countries than it is in high-income countries. It is also greater in societies with large economic inequalities than in those where wealth is more evenly distributed. And the most common cause of death is head injury, followed by abdominal injuries and intentional suffocation. While it is not possible to specify the proportion of child homicides that are committed by parents and other family members, special studies conducted in mainly high-income countries suggest that members of the family are responsible for the majority of homicides in children aged 0 to 14 years. And I mean, they just know the facts. They get the information. They compile it. They know what it says, and that's what it says. You know, I mean, that's why the stats out here. You know, they say around 90 to 95% of abuse happens within the home, and that 90 to 95% of child sexual abuse, the child knows the abuser. And, you know, because it's happening in the home. It's happening in the family. So who's in the family? Who's coming around the home? Who has access to the child? Right? This is very important for people to keep in mind. You know, people think child abuse, you know, they think, well, who's abusing children? Well, wherever the children are. You know, every time we see one of these headlines rolling out of a child being abused or ending up, you know, dead because of the abuse or been murdered or killed, you know, that's where the abuse is taking place, wherever that child was. So whether the child was at home or someone was watching the child, babysitter, whoever, you know what I mean? The parents leaving the child with somebody that they don't know, you know, or they think they know and they don't know, you know. It's just, this is where the abuse is happening. This is where children are being abused. So mainly it's in the homes because that's where children are mainly at, especially between the ages of 0 and 4. And, you know, this is horrific that people are doing these things to their children. And that's, you know, when the reports come rolling in, it's generally a parent or a caregiver or a boyfriend, girlfriend, or somebody who the parent is seeing in a relationship. So it's either the parent or the parent's other partner who is abusing the children. And sometimes it's a sibling. You know, there are the cases where siblings will abuse children. There are other siblings, and sometimes it's an aunt or an uncle, cousins, grandparents. I mean, it's people who have access to the children, right? And especially when it's systematic and it's ongoing, it would be somebody who would have access to the child. It's absolutely horrific. They said deaths represent only a small fraction of the problem of child maltreatment. Every year, millions of children are victims of non-fatal abuse and neglect. And some international studies have shown that, depending on the country, between a quarter and a half of all children report severe and frequent physical abuse, which includes being beaten, kicked, or tied up by parents. Much physical violence against children is inflicted as a punishment and is accepted by parents, prevailing social norms, and even often by law as a correct means of discipline. And so they actually have these diagram boxes where they actually show country by country, you know, the abuse that had been reported, the types of abuse, right, and the age of the child, I believe. If you go down and you check this out, this PDF is really good. Studies from around the world also show that approximately 20% of women and 5 to 10% of men report having been sexually abused as children. That's only the people who will speak up and actually say that they were. Many people, out of shame and out of fear, many issues surrounding the issue of disclosing abuse, many people will never ever tell anyone that they were abused, and they will suffer with it their whole entire lives. So we don't really know how many people have been abused, really, because, as you know, whether it's sexual or in any other way, if the survivor chooses to stay silent. But that is their own choice, and I believe that they have the right to, you know, to have that choice. And myself, I had to speak out because it was killing me not to. I didn't want to go to my grave with this information, and I thought, man, you know, people in my life, in my past, friends and whatnot, knew I was being abused because they grew up with me, they were seeing it. But, you know, there was other people that I would tell later on as an adult who I would mention, you know, my past to, because they would tell me some of their past or whatever. And but, you know, I mean, I was still needing to get this out here. I wanted the world to know what happened to me as a child and my family. You know what I mean? Because it was killing me that I was keeping this all inside, and I couldn't take it anymore. And so I had to go public with my story, and I really wanted people to get a hold of it. That's why I wrote my book, A Life of Death, The Redemption. It was a blog, really, first of all, called Not So Fond Memories Growing Up in an Abusive Home, which is still there. You know, I actually have about 5 of the chapters there. And but yeah, this is all the proceeds for the book that was published is all going to Dreamcatchers for Abused Children, as well as La Vida Juvies. I didn't want the money for those books because for me, I wanted it to help stop child abuse. So I didn't want to take the money. I couldn't take the money for those books. There's no way. And not only that, but it just would have killed me to take money for those books because the abuse that I suffered it really killed me on the inside. You know what I mean? And so my parents didn't kill me, but they did kill me spiritually and in every other way. And so I couldn't take money for writing those books. You know, it would have been like just too perverse. You know what I mean? Like I suffered and I watched my family suffer, and the money from those books doesn't mean anything to me. But what it means to me is that it will go to do something to help stop child abuse. You know what I mean? So that's much more important to me than paying, using that money to pay my bills or whatever. You know what I mean? I just couldn't, to me that was just kind of like, no, I couldn't do it. So I'm really glad that Dreamcatchers for Abused Children accepted that because they didn't want to. I was kind of forced it on them. I told them they would take the money for those books, right? So I'm hoping that it does, do something in the long run to help stop child abuse because this is absolutely unacceptable. This is unacceptable to me. It's unacceptable to a lot of people, and I'm so thankful for everybody who's doing anything to help stop child abuse and to make a difference in this mess for these kids out here because, we know so many children are going to lose their lives. So many children tonight, we won't be able to get to them. We won't be able to help them, and I know, and so many of us know what it's like to be suffering within a home full of abuse, whether it's physical abuse, beatings, and being kicked around and whatever whatever the parent decides to do or whoever it is that's abusing the child. So many of us know what that's like. Whether it's sexual abuse, so many of us know what that's like. Emotional, psychological abuse, right? Just over and over, day after day, night after night. And these kids, it's so sad. It just breaks my heart that we can't do something like now. You know what I mean? And with the $105 billion being pumped out annually because of child abuse in the United States, you would think that we could do something about this, but it's not working. That's why, and I'm not running the system down. I'm not running people down. I thank God for those people every day. But the thing is that we need to support the programs that have proven to work. And there are programs that they actually did prove that worked, but they're not funded. So those programs just sit, on some shelf somewhere. The fact that they were 100% doable, they were 100% successful, right? And yet those are the programs that get funded. And yet there's all these programs out here that obviously are not working because children are slipping through the cracks and children are not, the families are not getting help like they should, and the people aren't checking in on them like they should be. I'm not putting anybody down. Like I said, the abusers are the people who are at fault. You know what I mean? So I know where to put the blame. But the thing is that society, we really all need to get involved. There needs to be big, huge think tanks of people sitting around thinking, okay, how are we going to do this? How are we going to implement the programs? And how are we going to make sure that everybody has access to it? How are we going to protect these children? There needs to be more awareness, more education in the schools. There needs to be more education and awareness on the blocks. The violence is just such a huge issue in North America, and people think it's just a joke. But when you grow up in a violent home and you grow up in a violent neighborhood, you see it. I grew up in an extremely violent city, in an extremely violent neighborhood, in an extremely violent home. So it was pretty bad. You know what I mean? So I know what these kids are going through. And a lot of them, and so it's hard to reach those people, right? Because they're not so open to getting support. Those people who are living these violent lives, who are doing these violent things, and who are maintaining these violent relationships within their homes, are not susceptible to getting help. And so the children will suffer because we can't reach those people. You know what I mean? The people that we need to reach are not reachable. And so we've got to have think tanks of people to sit down and say, okay, then how are we going to address this? How are we going to come up with something that's going to work? And it's going to take think tanks of extremely intelligent people to sit down and think about this stuff. So I'm trying to encourage people, if you have brains, use them and do something, to get involved, or if you know somebody, because I'm telling you, like, this has got to change and it needs to be this generation. I mean, that's what I figure. I have nothing better to do with the rest of my days here on the planet than to make noise, and so and to really promote education and awareness regarding the issues surrounding child abuse. And so for me, like, this is so important, we really need to find as many people as we can to get on board and, get involved locally with your local community, local groups who are doing some really good work, and they've got a proven track record. Back them up. Get involved, nationally. Find a group that you just want to support nationally, and then back them up. Get involved, right? And then make sure that the children in your own life are not. If everybody would stop abusing their children, we could all go off and do something else. You know what I mean? This is what bothers me. Child abuse is 100% preventable. There's no reason for a child to be abused ever. So it's just that people choose to do this stuff to children. That's why I'm going to continue speaking out against it for as long as I'm here. Hopefully we can stop it before then, before my time is over. But hey, I'm willing to give the rest of my days to do this. Volunteer. So, that just tells you. So, get involved where you can, because these kids do not deserve this, and we really have to reach we have to reach everybody, because we need everybody to stop abusing children. Right? That's the whole issue. There wouldn't be any need for any of this if people would stop abusing children. Right? But there's a handful of people who are willing to stand up and say, no, this is not right. It never was right. It never will be right that a child should ever be abused in any way, shape, or form. You know what I mean? Like, children should not be suffering at the hands of another person. Bad enough the children suffer because of poverty and they may be poor, but they may be growing up in a loving home. Hey, that's all right. You know what I mean? Because at least they have parents who care about them and love them, and they're not hurting them, they're not sexually using them, they're not doing anything to them. Maybe they just don't have a lot of money. Well, that's okay, because children don't care about money. You know what I mean? But these little children's lives are being ripped apart, including their minds, including their bodies, including their whole entire being, by people who should be taking care of them and looking out for them and protecting them at all costs. So do what you can, to get involved, because this is absolutely unacceptable, and we really, all of us, we need everyone's voice in on this, right? So, it's very important that we do, everybody, most people who listen to my shows are already involved, but I'm hoping to catch one person, who may think, well, what can I do? Does my voice really count? Am I really, that important in the whole scheme of things? Absolutely. We all have to get involved somehow, some way, and we all have different, capabilities and different things that we can do, right? And so, I'm just trying to promote this, and for these kids out here, like tonight, we won't be able to reach them. Sadly enough, tomorrow night, probably not. But I'd like to say that this generation should be the one that stops child abuse. And if everybody would get up and make some noise, it would stop, because sooner or later the programs would be there. It'd be for all the people that weren't standing up saying, okay, let's stop child abuse, those would be probably the people you need to look in on, because they would probably be abusing their children. Most people who care about children are more than happy to stand up and say, let's stop child abuse, right? It's so important. So, thanks so much for tuning in. I appreciate it. I'll be back on, tomorrow morning, One Child Abuse Survivor to Another, 6 a.m., same time, same place. And then tomorrow night, Dreamcatchers Talk Radio here on Blog Talk Radio. And Friday as well. You can check my show page and whatnot. Thanks so much for being here. I appreciate it. And, I'll be back around on the weekend as well. Next Monday, I have Ray Luskin coming back on the show. Monday night, 7:30 p.m. Mountain Standard Time. And Ray Luskin, she's just awesome. And we're going to talk. She's going to do some healing through creativity, and we're going to talk about that. And we're going to look at using our creative expression for healing, and for using our unique voice and our unique creativities to help us, to heal as adult survivors, right? So Ray Luskin, she's awesome. I hope that you will tune in to check that out. That's next Monday night, 7:30 p.m. here for half an hour. So thanks, everybody. Have a great night. Take good care of yourselves. Bye-bye.